Hey y'all, I'm Carrie,
I'm Momo.
and this is Monstrous. Where the stories are strange, the shadows run deep, and the tea is always a little dark. Listener discretion is advised. Monstrous covers true crime, violence, and other unsettling subject matter that may be difficult for some listeners. All right, guys, right for another week.
Yay.
Yeah, we missed last week, so you're gonna get this one and the original scheduled episode for this week. So you're getting two this week. Yay! Fair fingers.
Woohoo.
Okay. So no new updates or anything like that. So we're just gonna dive right into it if you're ready.
I'm ready if you are.
Okay. So today we're gonna continue our two-part story on a case that gripped the United States for nearly 2 decades. And this one is a bit challenging. It's not because the facts are unclear or that the story itself is confusing. It's because it's the tale of a man who withdrew from society, transformed that isolation into ideology, and then acted on it for years. Now, we have our blanket advisory at the very beginning of every episode, but I want to emphasize that this episode does contain disturbing content, including violence, death, fear, and the gradual transformation of a person turning into something monstrous. So please take care of yourself while listening. You can't listen alone. Do so if you need to pause and come back later. Do that. Now, are you ready for part two of Ted Kaczynski? All right. To give me a thumbs up, everybody. Now, before we dive into the details, remember that what follows this is a long and harrowing journey of violence, fear, and the investigation that spanned across the country and decades. So, for anyone that has not listened to part one, make sure you go listen to that. You're going to want that background before you get into this one. But as a quick recap, Ted Kaczynski was a child born in Chicago. He was a math prodigy at Harvard, a professor at UC Berkeley for just 2 years before quitting academia, and he was a man who retreated to a cabin in the Montana wilderness. At the end of part one, Ted Kaczynski had already severed all ties with society. Like I said, he had left academia and then moved into a secluded cabin in the woods and constructed a worldview centered around resentment toward industrial society and technology. He had completely isolated himself, living without electricity or even running water. He was surrounded by pine trees and silence. But isolation wasn't enough. The wilderness that he loved was being destroyed. Planes began to fly overhead. Logging companies were cutting down trees. Bulldozers were destroying hiking trails that he once cherished. The world he had rejected was rejecting him right back, invading his sanctuary and encroaching on his solitude. And that is where his anger truly started. This is where the philosophy turned into action. And this was when our first bomb was detonated. From that point on, our case takes a different turn. It's no longer solely about Ted's isolation, it's about his actions stemming from that isolation. His ideology became violent, his resentment became death, and his philosophy became terror. That's the part of why this case continues to loom large in our collective consciousness. It spans nearly 2 decades, making it terrifying, perplexing, and incredibly difficult to solve. This wasn't a quick crime. It wasn't a single act. This was an entire campaign, a sustained, deliberate, years long assault on modern society itself. So let's explore the truly bizarre aspects of this case. So between 1978 and 1995, Ted Kaczynski carried out a bombing campaign that targeted universities, airlines, and individuals connected to technology and modern industry. To understand that scope, we're going to walk through each attack one by one, because when you see them laid out chronologically, the pattern becomes undeniable. Now, initially, the targets appeared unrelated. There was one attack that occurred at a university, another was linked to an airline, and then another which involved a professor. From an external perspective, it seemed random, which made it even harder to solve and even more unsettling. The victims were spread all across the country: Illinois, California, Utah, New York, New Jersey, Michigan, and then Tennessee. But the randomness was deliberate. His targets reflected his ideological hatred more than any personal vendetta. He wasn't simply selecting individuals, he was attacking the world that he believed had corrupted human life. Now, universities represented education and intellectual advancement, things that he saw as part of the industrial machine. The airlines represented technology and modern transportation, the very infrastructure of industrial society. And then professors and executives represented the people who built and maintained that system. Kaczynski wasn't targeting people because he knew them personally. He was targeting them because they represented something that he hated. This campaign became one of the longest running domestic terror investigations in the US history.
It was wild,
Yeah. So, in
to say
total,
the least.
right, for lack of better words.
Exactly.
So, in total, there were 16 known devices. Nine of them were mailed through the postal system. This is just wild. Like, to think of a time where someone could put a bomb in the fucking mail, throw a stamp on it, and just mail it.
That was the times, honey.
Like, it's just wild to think about that. That's a whole other world, that's for sure.
You got that right.
But this made the threat feel both intimate and widespread, as ordinary mail itself became something that people feared. So imagine that. It's a routine act of opening a package at work, receiving a letter at home, bec- becoming something that you have to be careful about. Mail carriers, university administrators, airline employees all started to look at parcels differently. Now, the first bomb was detonated on May 25th, 1978, at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. Professor Buckley Christ, I think that's how you say that, discovered a package wrapped in brown paper with a fake return address to himself. He was suspicious, of course, so he handed it to campus security officer Terry Marker, who opened it and it exploded. Marker sustained minor injuries and survived the blast. This marked the beginning of this entire campaign. This bomb was the spark. It was the first domino, the beginning of that 17-year reign of terror. Now, following this initial attack, the bombings continued over the next several months. In 1979, there were two more attacks. Another at
Damn,
Northwestern.
that was 47 years ago.
I know. I wasn't even alive yet.
No, your mama was barely born.
Yep. Yeah, depending on what month it was.
Yeah.
Yep, I wasn't even thought of yet.
No.
How the world goes round. Um, Another at Northwestern targeting a graduate student. And then the second one that year was on American Airlines Flight 444,
Ooh, I forgot about that.
which is crazy because 444 is an angel number.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
is that wild?
That might we.
I think so.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. My husband's outside weed eating. Sorry if you hear that. Hopefully you don't. So, the bomb on the American Airlines flight injured 12 people, each of them suffering from smoke inhalation. The pattern was starting to form, but investigators didn't quite have enough pieces to put the puzzle together just yet. A year later, in 1980, United Airlines executive Percy Wood was seriously injured at his home in Lake Forest, Illinois. A bomb had been placed in his mailbox, and when he opened it, the explosion shattered his hand and caused severe burns.
Ow.
He survived, but this attack showed that Ted was escalating. He was moving from university campuses to private homes, from random targets to more personal locations. Another year goes by, and it's 1981. A bomb was defused at the University of Utah. It had been discovered before it could detonate, but the message was clear. Ted was still active, still building devices, and still willing to kill.
He didn't say, I don't like you.
The pattern of these attacks was gradually becoming more apparent, even though it wasn't fully evident just yet. Investigators were starting to connect the dots, but they still didn't have a name, nor did they have a face. And they still didn't have a suspect. Then in 1982, a secretary at Vanderbilt University in Nashville was injured when a bomb exploded in her office. And then, July of that same year, an engineering professor named Diogenes, no, Diogenes Angelokos. I'm sorry, words are hard. This man was a professor at UC Berkeley, and he suffered severe burns and shrapnel wounds from a bomb in a computer lab.
Oh, that's evil.
He had been teaching a class when the device exploded. Both survived, but they both were permanently injured. Then a stretch of time would pass where devices were either safely defused or the trail went completely cold. But by 1985, the campaign resumed with brutal intensity. That year, John Hauser, graduate student,
You still weren't born.
nope, still a little ways off. A graduate student and U.S. Air Force captain lost fingers and partial vision from a bomb in a Berkeley computer lab.
Mm.
He was working on his research when the device had exploded. The bomb had been placed in a computer terminal, disguised as part of the equipment. Hauser did survive, but his dreams of becoming an astronaut were destroyed in that instant.
See, that's not cool.
Yeah, he's just he's just doing too much, really. Like
Mm.
honestly. Who has time to disguise a bomb as a computer terminal? Just calm down, sir. Write an angry letter.
Write a letter like everybody else does.
Oh, okay. Not to make light of it. I'm sorry. Now, the most devastating attack of 1985 came later. This was the first official murder, and it took place on December 11th in Sacramento, California. Hugh Scruton. He was a 38-year-old computer rental store owner, and he was killed when a bomb left behind inside his business exploded. He was opening his store in the morning, setting up for the day, when the device detonated. The blast killed him instantly. This was the first fatality caused by the Unabomber, and it intensified the case as the violence transcended mere fear to deadly. Scruton was a father. He had a young daughter who would now grow up without him. He had a wife who would wake up the next morning to news that her husband was dead. He had a life, a future, and a family, all of which was erased by a bomb. After Scruton's death, the pressure on investigators skyrocketed. This was no longer just about injuries. This was now about murder. This was about a killer who had proven that he was willing to kill and would likely kill again. Then, in 1987, Gary Wright, another computer store owner in Salt Lake City, sustained injury from another bomb. He was at his computer rental business when a bomb exploded. The pattern was becoming obvious. Computer stores, technology businesses, and people connected to the industry, all of which Ted hated. The bomb construction became more and more sophisticated, and the pattern became increasingly disturbing, although it remained difficult to fully comprehend. Ted was learning. He was improving his devices and making them each more deadly. Each bomb was better than the one before it. Now, through the 1980s and early 1990s, there were sporadic attacks. A geneticist in California, a computer science professor at Yale, but then there was another quiet period. Years passed without incident. Investigators wondered again if Ted had finally stopped, but he hadn't. The final fatal attacks occurred in December of 1994. Hey, I was born then. I was 6 months old,
When?
December of 94.
Yeah.
Yep. This was when Thomas Moser, an advertising executive in New Jersey, was killed at his home. A bomb had been mailed to his address, placed inside his mailbox, and when he opened it, the explosion killed him instantly. Moser was at his home. He was in the safety of his own net, and still, he was not protected. Then, in April of 1995, Gilbert Murray, a timber industry lobbyist in Sacramento, California, was killed at his office. Murray represented the timber industry, logging, deforestation, and the destruction of wilderness. He was a perfect target for Ted's ideology. The bomb exploded inside his office, killing him while he was working. Now, by this time, public fear had reached its peak. People were terrified, universities were on edge, airlines were suspicious of every package.
That's part of the reason why, the TSA is so strict on packages and X-rays, everything, and
Oh, really?
because of this, yeah.
Oh, I mean, I
That's what
guess it would
started it.
make yeah, it would make sense. It always takes one to just screw everything up for everybody. There's
I know it.
always one idiot in the crowd. Sorry,
Uh,
that wasn't
Ouchie.
nice.
Yeah, but that is so true, my darling.
Okay. The country was now living under the shadow of a killer who had proven that he could strike anywhere at any time. Throughout the entire campaign, 3 individuals lost their lives and 23 others were injured. So we have 26 people, 3 dead, 17 years. This was when the case took a darker turn. The investigation had been going on for nearly 2 decades. Some investigators had spent their entire careers on this case. They were burning out, they were frustrated, and they were desperate. Investigators meticulously examined the bombs, the letters, delivery methods, and the timing of the attacks. They delved into the construction details, the methods of mailing the devices, and how the attacks evolved. They studied every scrap of evidence, every fragment of metal, and every piece of wire. They looked for patterns in the bomb's construction. They analyzed the wood used in the devices. They traced the sources of the materials, examined the postal routes. They followed every lead, no matter how small it was. These repeated details provided them with some clues, even though they remained unable to identify the bomber. The case became a puzzle composed of small, stubborn fragments. Each individual piece held significance, but none of them alone could provide a definitive solution. It was like trying to solve a mystery with only half the pieces. They knew what had happened, they knew when it had happened, they knew where it had happened, but they didn't know who had done it. Now, as the attacks continued, the pressure on law enforcement intensified. The FBI established an extensive Unabomb task force dedicated to the case, transforming it into one of the most renowned manhunts in U.S. history. The Unabomb task force was massive. It included dozens of investigators from multiple agencies, and they worked full time on this case, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They lived and breathed this investigation. They ate, slept, and dreamed about finding the Unabomber. Some investigators dedicated their entire careers to the case, like I said, living with it, contemplating it, and bearing the weight of it for years. Some retired without ever solving it. Some passed away before the case was ever closed. They carried the burden of those 3 dead victims and the 23 injured, knowing that they may never find the man responsible. The prolonged nature of the bombings exacerbated the fear that gripped society. Universities had become concerned about their mail, airlines grew uneasy, and families of victims were left grappling with grief and confusion. The public lived with the unsettling realization that anyone, anywhere, could be the next victim. You could be a professor, an airline worker, a computer store owner, or even just a timber lobbyist. You could literally be anyone, and you could be next. Even ordinary mail became something that people scrutinized differently. What once felt routine began to feel perilous. People started looking at packages with suspicion. They started wondering about every letter that had arrived, and they started being afraid of something that they had never been afraid of before. And that's the part of what made the case so unsettling. The attacks transitioned from shocking to eerily familiar in the public's mind, intensifying their disturbing nature. The randomness instilled a sense of vulnerability inside everyone. And at the heart of it all were the 3 lives lost and the 23 that had been wounded. They weren't just numbers, they were the human reality behind the case. Hugh Scruton, Thomas Moser, and Gilbert Murray. 3 people who died because a man in a cabin in Montana hated the world they lived in.
And it's so crazy.
Right. Like, this guy's just, he just did too much. He was just, I don't know, he was just way too extra. Like, he really was. Like, I don't understand what point you're trying to make with this. John Hauser, Percy Woods, Gary Wright, and 20 others who survived but were permanently injured. 23 people who would never be the same. For years, investigators faced the challenge of working without a known suspect. They constructed the case based on behavior and bomb design rather than relying on a face or a name. This led to prolonged frustration, dead ends, and uncertainty. The clues existed, but they were incredibly difficult to connect. The investigation gradually narrowed, but it had never reached a clean conclusion. They had behavior patterns, bomb signatures, and delivery methods. They even had timing patterns, but they didn't have a person. This was one of those cases where law enforcement recognized the presence of something, but they just couldn't quite grasp it. As the years passed, the case became a symbol of the difficulty in apprehending someone who leaves behind fragments instead of obvious answers. There are still parts of this case that still remain elusive today. How many other bombs were never discovered? How many individuals were targeted but never actually attacked? Those are questions that we don't have the answers to today. What we know is that Ted built more than 16 devices, and he had materials for more. He had plans for more. How many bombs did he make that were never sent? How many attacks did he plan but never attempted? Things we will never know. Then came the turning point, and that is the manifesto. In 1995, Ted Kaczynski sent a manifesto titled Industrial Society and Its Future. It spanned approximately 35,000 words and served as the most comprehensive glimpse into his worldview. This wasn't merely a rambling document, as many people would think. It was actually the ideological cornerstone of this entire case. Within it, Ted articulated his anti technology philosophy and directly linked it to his justification for violence. The document transformed the case from a bombing investigation into a public dilemma. It compelled newspapers, law enforcement, and the public to confront a profound question. Should we publish a killer's words if doing so might aid in his capture? The newspapers hoped that the content would help identify the author, but this decision was contentious. Publishing it could have given him a platform, amplifying his ideology to millions of readers. It could have inspired copycats, and it could also make him a figurehead for anti technology movements. However, not publishing it risked missing the crucial clue that could break the case. The manifesto was the only thing Ted had ever sent that contained his actual words, his thoughts, and his actual writing style. So, in September of 1995, the Washington Post published the manifesto, which garnered national attention and became a significant point of contention in the investigation. So, the Post published it in three parts. Millions of people read it, and the entire country was suddenly exposed to Ted Kaczynski's ideology. Ted viewed industrial society as a machine that controlled, weakened, and corrupted individuals. He believed technology stripped away freedom and made people dependent. In his opinion, modern life did not liberate people, but instead, it trapped them. He argued that industrial society had to collapse before human beings could regain autonomy. He framed violence as a direct attack on the system, not just the individuals caught within it. These weren't just abstract ideas, these were his justification for murder. This was his explanation for why he was blowing up people and killing them. This manifesto served as the ideological foundation of the Unabomber case, explaining not only his beliefs, but also the justifications for his actions. And it was this manifesto that finally broke the case. So after it was published in those three separate parts and, millions of people saw it, the case took a very unexpected turn in a deeply personal way. David Kaczynski recognized the writing style. David was Ted Kaczynski's younger brother. They grew up together in the same house. They shared the same parents, the same background, and David knew his brother's writing better than anyone else. So David had first suspected that Ted might be capable of extreme actions somewhere around 1994 or 1995. He noticed similarities in the writing, patterns, and the language, but he never imagined that Ted could be the Unabomber. He couldn't believe it. or rather, he didn't want to believe it. But when he read the manifesto, something clicked. Nevertheless, whether he actually thought he was or he was just in denial, when he read the manifesto in September of 1995, he saw Ted's language, patterns, and even his brother within it. The writing style was unmistakable. The vocabulary was the same, sentence structure, all of it the exact way that Ted thought, the way he expressed himself, and how he organized his ideas. It was all there in plain sight. This realization must have been unbearable for David. This was not this was not just a tip. It was a brother coming to terms with the truth about his older brother. David had to make a choice. He could either ignore what he saw and pretend that he didn't notice, keep it to himself and never say anything, or he could come forward. And David came forward. In February of 1996, David's attorney provided the definitive tip and old letters to the FBI. The FBI then spent several weeks building their case, monitoring the area, and obtaining a search warrant. Now, David Kaczynski didn't just give them a name. He gave them evidence. He gave them old letters that had been written by Ted, their very own writing samples. He gave them everything that he had. The FBI would then take those letters and compare it to the manifesto, and the writing matched. It was the same style, same language message, same language. They had everything. So, in April of 1996, investigators raided Ted Kaczynski's cabin in rural Montana near Lincoln and arrested him there. The cabin was exactly what you would expect from a man who had rejected society. Like we said in part one, no electricity, no running water, surrounded by trees, completely isolated and hidden. Now,
That
when
sounds good sometimes.
I don't know, that much isolation is not good for people, okay?
Well, I'm sorry, I've gotta have water and electricity.
Like, I like being away from people and, like, having my space and everything, but that much
No, I
isolation
wouldn't. I'm
is
just
not good for
saying
you.
a touch of it.
Right. This is just a little bit. Have my closest neighbor be, like, 2 miles away from me. I'm good.
I'm okay with that.
Right, exactly. I don't need you, like, right up on me.
I don't need you in my business.
Right. Now, when investigators approached Ted, he didn't resist, but he didn't confess either. He initially maintained his innocence and vigorously fought the charges. He even attempted to dismiss his lawyers when they sought to present an insanity defense. He denied being the Unabomber until the evidence became irrefutable. Ted never expressed remorse or apologized to the victims. He fought the legal system fiercely, only finally entering a guilty plea in 1998 to avoid the death penalty. But his motivations remained defiant until the very end. Finding the suspect in such an isolated location only reinforced how detached he had actually become from society. The cabin served as physical evidence of his distance from the world and his preparation for violence. Inside, investigators discovered bomb materials, journals, and a draft of the manifesto itself. They also found a live device and sufficient materials to confirm the danger within the cabin. The bomb materials matched the devices that had been used in the attacks. The journals contained his thoughts, his plans, and his ideology. The draft of the manifesto was the original version, written by Ted himself. And like I said, there was the live bomb, a working device ready to be used. Ted's handwritten materials directly linked him to the attacks. His arrest finally provided a face to a mystery that had persisted for years. 15 years, 17 years, almost 2 whole decades. And finally, they had a name, a face, and they would finally get justice. In 1998, Ted Kaczynski accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to life in prison without parole in order to avoid the death penalty. His 2001 appeal was rejected, and he spent most of his sentence behind bars at ADX Florence in Colorado, the supermax prison known as Bombers Row, where other notorious bombers were housed. ADX Florence is the most secure prison in the United States. Inmates are locked in their cells 24 hours a day. They have minimal contact with other prisoners. They have minimal contact with the outside world as a whole. They are completely isolated. Ted spent most of his sentence there, in maximum security, in that complete isolation, surrounded by other violent criminals. Then, in late 2021, due to deteriorating health, Ted was transferred to the Federal Medical Center at Butner in North Carolina. It was there that he would pass away in 2023 at 81 years old.
I'm surprised he lived that long.
Yeah. Well, that's because he spent most of his prison sentence in isolation.
They have their ways,
Yeah, that's true.
but
Now, his death in 2023 did not erase the damage. It simply closed a chapter, but the case continues to be discussed in relation to extremism, radicalization, isolation, and the way dangerous beliefs can grow in silence. Ted Kaczynski died alone in prison in 2023. The man who demanded the collapse of industrial society ended up confined within one of its most controlled institutions. The irony here is devastating. He hated prisons, he hated the system, and he hated civilization. And in the end, he spent the last 27 years of his life locked in a cage, maintained by the very system he wanted to destroy. In his final years, Ted Kaczynski remained largely silent. He wrote little, spoke rarely, and simply existed inside that cell, isolated the same exact way he had been for most of his life. He never wrote another manifesto, he never spoke publicly, and he never gave interviews. And lastly, he never expressed remorse. He just existed, alone, in silence, until he died. For the families of the victims, the case never truly ended. Even after the arrest and trial, they carried the loss with them every day. Hugh Scrutna's daughter grew up without her father. Thomas Moser's wife woke up every morning to an empty house. Gilbert Murray's sons lost their dad when they were still children. John Hauser lives with permanent injuries. Diogenes Angelikos lives with permanent scars. Percy Wood lives with a hand that was shattered by a bomb. The legal conclusion failed to alleviate the fear, grief, and human suffering caused by the case. Even today, it remains one of the most notorious domestic terrorism investigation in U.S. history. Ted was caught, he was sentenced, he was in prison, and he died. But the victims are still victims. Their families are still grieving, and the injuries are still there. This case transcends its historical significance. It serves as a cautionary tale about the potential consequences of isolation, ideology, and unchecked anger. What makes this case particularly haunting is the transformation of ordinary intelligence and extreme isolation into a devastating force. Ted wasn't a monster from birth. He wasn't born evil. He was a child, and he was brilliant, but he was also isolated. And over time, that isolation transformed him into something dangerous. The true horror lies not only in the violence, but also in the prolonged period that it remained hidden in plain sight. For 15 years, he hid. How do you hide for that long? How do you injure 23 people and kill three others and not be caught for 15 years? Those are questions we'll never have the answers to. In the end, this case compels us to examine not only Ted Kaczynski, but also the system that allowed him to drift so far without intervention. His parents noticed that he was different, but they didn't stop him. His teachers noticed that he was brilliant, but they didn't help him connect with others. His professors noticed that he was isolated, but they didn't reach out. His colleagues noticed that he was difficult, but they didn't intervene. The system failed him. The system failed the victims. The system failed everyone. Now, some aspects of this story will remain shrouded in mystery. We may never fully comprehend Ted's thoughts, plans, or the extent of his potential actions. We may never know how many bombs he truly built or how many more attacks he had planned, and we'll never know how much farther he would have gone if he had not been caught. And lastly, we may never understand why he did it, what made him hate the world so much, or what drove him to kill. This entire thing leaves us questioning how many warning signs were overlooked along the way. How many times could someone have reached out to him? How many times could someone have intervened? And how many times could someone have stopped him before he became the Unabomber? And that is where the story concludes. It's two parts, one story. From a math prodigy at Harvard to a manhunt that gripped the nation. Part one, we covered the childhood, the isolation, the academy, the cabin, the ideology. And here we covered the bombs, the terror, the investigation, manifesto, the arrest, and the aftermath. Together, those two parts tell the complete story of one of the most notorious domestic terrorists in American history. And that is the story of Ted Kaczynski.
He was crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Makes you see how much the system all around really did fail.
Oh, the system just
Yeah. Like when you break it down and you start from childhood, you could really see how so many people around him just failed. There were so many possibilities someone could have intervened that just one could have
all it took was
changed.
one.
Yep, could have changed the entire direct trajectory of his life.
Mhm.
Yep, wild one.
It is.
Okay, you want to know what our other one for today is going to be?
But
Okay, we're gonna go on a completely different journey with this one. Okay, we're gonna go over here to left field. So put your imagination cap on. You got it on nice and snug.
best snuggles it's gonna get.
Imagine a town in 1518. A woman begins dancing in the street, unable to stop. Soon, others join her, and the dance spreads rapidly. Within weeks, hundreds of people are dancing nonstop, unable to rest or eat, some succumbing to exhaustion. There's no music, no choice, just unrelenting dancing. What drives people to dance until they can barely breathe? What force compels an entire community to move until their bodies give out? Is it a disease? Is it a curse? Is it madness? Or is it something else entirely? So make sure you tune in for that second episode today as we delve back into the year 1518.
Okay, that was before my time.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
Before mom and daddy's time.
Yep. All right, that is it for this one. Guys, you can find all of our social media links in the episode description, as well as our email for case suggestions, listener tells you'd like us to share on the show. Please give us a rate and a review. While you're at it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and enable your downloads so you don't miss those episodes. And that's all I have. You got anything?
I do wanna wish you a belated happy birthday,
Thank you. You told me the day of my birthday, but yeah. Thank you anyway.
but the listeners didn't hear it.
Oh, that's true.
Uh, my girl
Yep.
had a birthday a week ago, and she got her favorite cake, which took mama all day to make.
Yep.
I'm not as fast as I used to be.
If I had to pick one cake, that would be my favorite. I'm not a big cake person, but if it was like gun to the head, you have to choose, it would be that one.
Now, I like my orange mandarin cake.
Ew.
Oh, no, you'd like it. I'm been wanting to try it with peaches.
Oh, that might be good. Speaking of cake, I gotta make them stupid cupcakes. I'm gonna do that tomorrow. I ain't doing it today.
Yeah, it won't take long to do it tomorrow.
No.
You gotta get it all done tomorrow because you ain't gonna have time doing any of it on Monday.
I know. Yep.
Monday's gonna be a rough day.
I know it's gonna be a long day. Okay, anyway, guys, sorry. You're not here for all that. Okay, so that's all we got. Thanks for joining us. That's all we have. So make sure you remember to
Watch out for monsters.
don't kill people, and we'll catch y'all next time. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
This episode is sponsored by Invisaware, discreet safety jewelry and accessories that can instantly alert your trusted contacts and share your location with just a click. No subscriptions, no hassle, just added peace of mind. Get 10% off your order at invisaware.com/monstrous10.